Good evening, ghoulish esteemed viewers. Tonight, we sail alongside with Frank Hampstead and his crew of fishers as they discover there's more in the sea to fear than fish in beneath the sky. If you enjoy spine-tingling stories like this, don't hesitate to creep up on that subscribe button and give it a scare. And remember to like this content and turn on notifications as I have more original horror tales coming your way. Now, let's get back to the scares.
As night fell, the ocean roared, and bolts of lightning cleaved the sky, illuminating the churning waters. Frank and his motley crew of 8, seasoned fishermen and novices alike, prepared the nets for the evening haul. Among them was John Phillips, a tall man with a scraggly orange beard flecked with gray. John was stern and unfriendly, particularly toward Frank's first mate, Marcus, a confident black man who had spent his life at sea. John resented Marcus's playful nature, unable to understand why the captain kept him around. "Captain, the sea seems restless," Brim said, approaching Frank at the bow, his eyes scanning the disturbed water. Frank nodded, furrowing his brow. "Yes, but that's just a storm brewing. I fear it may be more than we can handle," Brim replied, apprehension creeping into his voice. "Try telling that to the ship," Frank chuckled, forcing confidence. "Believe me, it has weathered worse." Below deck, the crew passed the time playing cards. Marcus teamed up with Jeremy, the mechanic, who was lost in thought, unable to reach his pregnant wife and 11-year-old son due to poor cell reception. They faced off against brothers Alan and Justin Brown, known as Tom and Jerry for their constant bickering over religion. Alan believed in God, while Justin saw life as mere chance. John, on the other hand, preferred the solitude of the radio, spending his time knitting. The rest of the crew opted for food and sleep, waiting for a chance to reach land again. Suddenly, an unnatural jolt rocked the vessel, as if the sea itself had gripped the ship. Alan clutched the cross around his neck, praying in silence. "Get a grip, everyone," Frank shouted. "We probably just hit a rock. Stay focused." But the crew rushed upstairs, now in shock, to witness a strange luminescence flickering beneath the surface. Impossible, Frank thought, unaware of what lurked below. "Let's not jump to conclusions," John muttered. "It could be a submarine." Marcus scoffed. "How many submarines glow like that? And what about its shape? Maybe you think it's the lost city of Atlantis down there partying with a giant glow stick," Marcus mocked. "Always a joker, aren't you, Marcus?" John snapped. "I had to leave my family for months to feed them, not to mention my sick daughter. We all need to pull together to meet our quota and go home." Tension thickened the air. "Look around," Marcus insisted. "We all have families to get to. It's okay. I know you're scared, just like the rest of us." "What's that?" John said, anger flaring. "The only thing I'm scared of is being stuck on this ship with you." Marcus's voice turned cold. "Is there something you want to say, John?" Before they could escalate further, the storm unleashed its full fury. The sea whisper pitched violently, and the crew scrambled to secure the nets as waves crashed over the bow. Then, from the depths, a deafening roar erupted, shaking the very timbers of the ship. Grotesque sea creatures emerged, twisted seahorses with elongated limbs and claw-like hands, galloping aboard in a horrifying display. Chaos erupted. "Grab whatever you can use as a weapon," Frank shouted. Alan tossed a broom to Justin, who swung it wildly at the creatures as they flooded the deck. Brim grabbed a small fishing net and covered 5 of the grotesque beings, hoping it would hold them. But the creatures began to tear through the net with ease. Jeremy helped Brim tie the net to the anchor and tossed it overboard. "What are those things?" Rory yelled, smacking the creatures away with pots and pans, sustaining minor injuries. Just then, Justin screamed in agony as one of the grotesque beings snapped the broom with its claws, managing to rip 2 fingers off Justin's hand. He pulled the creature's bone-like head from his shoulder and killed it, but another took its place, and another, until Justin was overwhelmed, clawed and torn apart. Alan rushed to help, stepping on the remaining injured creatures, but it was too late. Tears streamed down his face as he cradled his dying brother. "It's okay, Justin. I'm right here," he whispered as Justin took his last breath. Horror gripped the crew. John, grief-stricken, covered Justin's body with a blanket he had made for his ill daughter. "What were those things?" Jeremy cried, panic rising. "I don't know," Frank replied, fury and fear swirling within him. "But we know they're dangerous." Then a loud, ominous noise echoed from the depths. "We don't know if they're aliens or undiscovered sea creatures," Frank declared. "But we need to prepare for another wave." The sea illuminated again, revealing something even more terrifying, a massive, visceral creature, barely discernible in the darkness. The crew stood back to back, weapons drawn, as a tentacled monstrosity emerged, a starfish-like creature with gaping yellow teeth. Frank charged with an axe but was swiftly knocked aside. In a desperate fit of courage, Jeremy lunged at the creature with a fishing spear, only to be caught in its tentacles. Bones cracked as it tried to swallow him whole. But Jeremy gathered all his strength and pulled his head back out of the nightmarish mouth, along with a tooth that had lodged itself in his skull. He looked back one last time, defeated, and softly said, "Help me," before the creature ripped him in half, swallowing him whole and painting the ship in a spray of blood. Frozen in horror, John stood paralyzed, muscles tense, unresponsive to the chaos around him. Marcus, desperate, shook him. "John, you have a family that depends on you." "We all do." But the words were drowned out by the creature's monstrous feeding, the sound of bone crunching and flesh tearing echoing in John's ears. Alan was no better off, cradling his deceased brother. Marcus dashed for the axe, but a long, slimy tentacle coiled around his leg, tripping him. He struggled against the pull, feeling the creature's insatiable hunger drawing him closer. With sheer determination, he swung the axe, severing one of the beast's tentacles. The creature shrieked, its movements slowing. Seeing what had happened to Jeremy, Brim decided it was best to meet the threat at a distance. He and Rory threw chairs and various objects in hopes of driving it away, but it didn't retreat. With a furious roar, it lunged at John, who barely dodged the attack. The creature crawled aboard, latching onto John's leg and dragging him across the slick deck. John clawed desperately at anything within reach, fingers scraping against the wood as he fought against being pulled into the depths. With a sickening pop, the creature dislocated his leg. John screamed, a raw sound of agony, as another tentacle wrapped around his torso. Just when all hope seemed lost, Marcus swung the axe again, striking the creature with all his might. The beast released John, and he fell to the floor, gasping for breath. "Thank you." John gasped, regret flooding him for all the harsh words he had said. "I was sure I was a goner." Marcus grinned despite the terror. "Who else would I have to argue with?" As they caught their breath, John stood, rage igniting within him. "What did you think you'd find, you grotesque abomination? We're not easy prey." Marcus, still grinning, replied, "Well, we did give them one thing." "What's that?" John asked, skepticism in his voice. "One star." For the first time, John laughed, a brief reprieve from the horror. But just as quickly, the laughter faded. An even larger tentacle emerged from the depths, tilting the vessel dangerously. The sea whisper heaved, and the men slid across the deck, scrambling to hold on. John grabbed a pole, heart racing, while Marcus clung to the edge, both men straining against the monstrous force threatening to tear them apart. As Marcus lunged to grab John's hand, sheer terror flashed in his eyes. In that moment, they understood, death was imminent. Before they could react, the creature lunged forward, dragging Marcus down into the abyss, his screams echoing into the night. The sound was a chilling reminder of the terror lurking just beneath the surface. Hours passed, and the sea calmed. The captain awoke with a minor head injury, inquiring about the crew's condition. He broke when he heard about Marcus's passing. He had been not only his trusted shipmate for years but a friend. Brim went to comfort Frank. John spoke with sorrow in his voice. If it's any consolation, he died brave. He took a few of those creatures with him. As John started to walk away, Frank said, "You know, you were wrong about Marcus. When he was fresh on my ship, I was young and arrogant, just like you. He warned me about the tide's unpredictability, but I didn't listen. I got knocked overboard, and the next thing I knew, I was coughing and choking on water. Over me was Marcus, he saved my life." The storm roared as lightning cracked through the sky, bringing rain with it. "We should get below deck," Brim said. "We're already dealing with aliens or whatever. I don't want to catch a cold too." As they descended, Alan looked back and saw movement under the blanket covering his brother's body. "Wait, guys, I think Justin is alive." The crew looked in disbelief. They knew no one could survive such deep wounds. Alan rushed over, removing the blanket, only to be met with a leftover disfigured sea creature. Before Alan could step on it, the creature released a green toxic fume into his face. Alan squashed it while cursing. But suddenly, his face felt hot. As he touched it, he sensed it dragging down, almost as if it were melting. He screamed in agony as blood slid down his body, his eyes blood-clotted and barely hanging on to their sockets. No one dared to save him, knowing they would suffer the same fate. The remaining 4 crew members talked about their families and what they would do when they returned home. Rory asked, hesitation in his voice, "But what if we don't make it?" The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Frank suggested they write down the things they hadn't accomplished but would like to live through their loved ones. With tears in their eyes, one by one, they put their letters into Ziploc bags and pinned them to the wall, just in case someone found the ship and they were no longer among the living. Suddenly, they heard heavy, bipedal footsteps. "It's them," Brim whispered as the room grew silent. "What do we have left to fight back with?" Frank asked. "An axe, a butcher knife, a broken mop stick, and a flare," John replied. "Also matches," Rory chimed in. "Maybe they think we're dead," Frank suggested. But that notion was quickly dismissed as whatever it was started twisting the door handle, pushing against it with intelligence. Dread poured into their souls as they watched the hinges come loose. As it gave way, 2 large, bipedal humanoid lifeforms emerged, almost identical, bearing 3 long, skinny fingers attached to fin-like hands. Their dark gray bodies were covered in scales, with large heads and alien-like eyes. The remaining 4 readied their weapons. Brim, wielding the butcher knife, threw it to test the humanoid's durability. To his shock, it bled a blackish-blue substance. It was hard to tell, but it bled nonetheless. The creatures stood still, almost shocked, as if they had never tested their mortality against a human before. They charged at the unknown beings. Rory led the charge with the broken mop stick, managing to stab one, but the creature backhanded him across the room. Its gills opened, letting out a vibrating screech that pushed everyone away. Rory, believing they had the aliens on the ropes, picked up the axe, attempting to end the injured being. In mid-swing, the other alien grabbed Rory's arm. Rory looked up at the towering creature. The alien's face appeared expressionless, but Rory could tell it was angry as it ripped his arm off, throwing it at Brim's feet. The injured creature let out another screech, and in a horrific instant, it snapped Rory's neck. "No!" screamed Frank as he took advantage of the distraction and drove the broken mop stick into the head of the uninjured creature, causing the injured one to retreat. The remaining 3 stood in shock, the horrors of the night weighing heavily on them. "I guess this is it," the captain said, his voice tinged with hopelessness. "It's been a pleasure," Brim replied. John, with shallow confidence, said, "When this is all over, I'm going to need that raise, Captain." Frank laughed, though tinged with despair. "I guess Marcus rubbed off on you after all." As they went up to the deck for one last fight, the creature, standing tall while limping backward, made a small vibrating noise as it bent its legs and jumped into the sea. "Is it over?" Brim questioned. They saw something in the distance resembling boats with huge flags, moving like serpents. John fired the flare gun, and the lights revealed 3 unnatural large fins attached to shark-like creatures hurtling toward the ship. As they braced for impact, the creatures dove under the water. Why didn't they attack? Brim wondered. Upon looking behind them, their hearts pounded as a spaceship ascended slowly above the vessel, stopping about 100 feet above it, casting an eerie glow over the wreckage. Small blue lights spun at the bottom of the craft, pulsing like a predator's heartbeat. Suddenly, the air thickened with a metallic hum, drowning out the chaos around him. The blue light beamed down, piercing the darkness and enveloping the ship in an otherworldly glow. The vessel shuddered and buckled, as if gripped by an unseen hand. With a violent jerk, it was torn from the water, crashing against the metallic structure above, sending a spray of debris and saltwater into the air. John and Brim were flung into the sea, gasping for breath as they fought against the tide. But the horror was far from over. The blue light descended again, a malevolent spotlight illuminating the wreckage below. It seized the broken hull, lifting it effortlessly as if it were a mere toy. John's heart raced as he realized the true nature of this entity. It was not just a watcher, it was a harbinger of doom. With a thunderous roar, the ship was smashed to the bottom of the metallic structure, breaking into pieces, a grotesque crunch echoing through the water. In that split second, John saw Brim, caught in the debris, killed instantly and leaving John alone in the abyss. Tears streamed down John's face, mixing with the saltwater as he realized the futility of his situation. No one would ever find him or any of them, as the spaceship descended back into the water, leaving a giant wave in its wake, drowning him in icy despair. The storm slowly faded as the blue lights disappeared beneath the waves.